This is lesson 38 for course 1, adding and subtracting decimal numbers and whole numbers, part 1. Please do the part 1 video, part 1 questions in lesson practice, and then come back and watch part 2 for lesson 38. So when we're looking at adding and subtracting decimal numbers and whole numbers, the really big thing you have to pay attention to is the same thing we pay attention to when we're working with decimal numbers at all. And you have to pay attention to where is the decimal. You need to make sure the decimal has been lined up. For example, if we have the numbers 11, 8.5, 11, 8.5, and we are adding them all together, what you need to make sure you are doing is that you are lining up where the decimals are. Now, these two numbers have a decimal in them already. What you need to remember is that a whole number has a decimal, we just don't write it. Okay, it has a decimal after the ones column. That's where the decimal always is behind the ones column. Ones column, decimal, others. Okay, so let's line them up. We have 11, decimal, 8, decimal, 5, 11, decimal. Notice all my decimals are going straight down this line. 8, decimal, 5. Okay, and then we're going to add these together. Now, if you're like me, I like to put zeros in just so I understand that that place is still being accounted for. There's just nothing there. Okay, so I like to put the zeros in. It's up to you whether you want to or not, but the main thing is to make sure these decimals are all lined up. So 5 add 5 is 10. Carry it over. Decimal, make sure that decimal is all nice and lined up. 8, 9, 10, plus 8 is 18, plus 1 is 19. Carry over, 1, 2, 3. You end up with 39. Now, when I'm writing this answer, I, again, can either write it 39.0 or I can just write 39. Because, again, while this is always here, unless you have something after it, we don't normally write it. So either of these would be the correct answer. And again, your biggest thing is just to make sure all your decimals are lined up and remembering that the decimal place is behind or to the right of the ones column. Okay, let's look at another one together. Okay, we are subtracting 5 from 12 and 75 hundredths. Again, we're just going to line this up like decimals. So 12.75 is still bigger than 5. So we put 12. Okay, and then we have to put 5. Now remember, this decimal tells me this is the ones column, this is the tenths column, hundredths column. So 5 being a 1 goes under the ones column. And even though we don't normally write it, we can put a decimal there so that we make sure our decimals are all nice and lined up. And again, I like to put zeros in just because I like to know that that place behind is still being accounted for, even though we don't have anything in it. 5 take away 0 is 5. 7 take away 0 is 7. Decimal. 12 take away 5 is 7. And done. Okay, you have 7.75. All right. It's exactly the same as normal addition and subtraction, where we're doing it in column method. You need to make sure all your columns are lined up. Now, the problem with doing that sometimes is that sometimes it'll have columns that the other number doesn't have. That's why I say make sure you're lining up the decimal. If your decimal is lined up, all your columns are lined up. That is adding and subtracting decimal numbers and whole numbers, part 1.